All right, hey folks. So today we're going to be talking about rest periods. It's not a topic that I usually like to discuss because the research on it is so split. However, I feel like I can't stay silent on it anymore. It's another area where I feel we're a little bit misguided over the last 5 or 10 years, and I want to add my own experience and some perspective, as I like to do with modern research. So firstly, thanks for making it onto my channel. If you have any questions or comments, pop them down below. And if you'd like to work with me on your own strength and physique goals, there's a link in the description. So firstly, I do feel there's value in timing rest periods. The whole mantra of go when you're ready is quite chaotic. And for example, me going when I'm ready now might be 60 to 90 seconds, right? When I was heavier in my powerlifting days or my bigger days, now I was like 95 kilos and I was a lot more out of shape. Like that was, I'd do a heavy set of squats and that's it. Goodbye, switch your phone off, see you in about 5 minutes, right? But now I recover a lot faster. So the whole idea of going when you're ready, there's a certain amount of, it's an unknown. I think we can do better than that, basically. So let's talk about where rest period evidence has surfaced from and where it came from. Firstly, if we look at, I did a Google search just prior to getting on this video. I did a Google search where I looked at rest periods for bodybuilding, and I used the timeline of 2000 to 2004. And it came up with a bunch of articles, old articles now, which are 17 plus years old. And I picked out one of them, and it was from bodybuilding.com. And there was a guy on there writing an article for bodybuilding.com back in the early days of the internet. And he was very adamant that rest periods would be between 60 to 90 seconds for hypertrophy. I thought, okay, that's interesting. And this guy was a, decent amateur level bodybuilder. I looked up another article, and this time it was from a pro bodybuilder who used to compete back then called Gunter Schilkamp. And he was also saying 60 to 90 seconds rest as optimum. I thought, okay, interesting. But I just wanted to make the point that what we used to believe, which I think everyone knows this by now, we used to think that it was shorter rest periods for hypertrophy and longer rest periods for strength. And that was the idea. And we believed that for many decades. In fact, if you take it right back to the 60s in Arnold's era, Arnold was vehement in his insistence that 1 minute rest period, even for leg training, was ideal. He would do a ton of work, and it would just be on the very short rest periods. So he would really focus on that density of work. And if you look at people from his era, like Leo Colbert, he also said something very similar. 1 minute rest periods. If we go to the modern era and look at Jay Cutler was also very, very insistent that it was shorter rest periods, about 45 seconds max. Now, if we go even beyond that to sort of like Steve Reeves, Bill Pearl sort of era, not Bill Pearl so much because he was a heavier trainer, but there was in the Steve Reeves era this idea that you would rest a little bit less rather than a little bit more. It was quite uncommon to see people resting 2 or 3 minutes, or reading about people resting 2 or 3 minutes back then. So bear in mind, the research on rest periods is from the last 5 to 10 years. Now, let's just look at how well that's gone for us over the last 5 or 10 years. People love research. People love it. And people will be down in the comments right now going, well, actually, Faz, what about the research? Yeah, well, let's look at the research. Let's look at how the research has gone for us. Let's look at the research over the last 5, 10 years. What about the frequency research over the last 5, 10 years? What did that show? Well, 5 years ago, if you weren't training your body parts 2 or 3 times a week because of the muscle protein synthesis, then you were just a dinosaur, right? Bro splits. You had people actually on the internet saying that bro splits were dead. Bro splits were rubbish, and you were a moron for using bro splits, even though bro splits were responsible for some of the greatest physiques of all time. So how did that go for the modern research? What about volume? About 5 or 10 years ago, the whole 10 to 20 sets protocol came about. Right now, we're in the middle of the high volume stuff. 45 sets, increasing amounts of volume are the better. But we've just had a meta-analysis release from Schoenfeld Steele, who have said, yes, actually, 10 to 20 sets is good, but probably most of you will fit on the lower end. Now, how many of you 5 or 10 years ago were thinking, 10 to 20 sets, let's try 25, right? Because I did. The thought crossed my mind. And what about training to failure? There's a whole bunch of stuff about training to failure. 5 years ago, again, it was like, if you weren't training a body part 2 or 3 times a week with 25 sets per body part and not training to failure, you were just a dinosaur, right? With 3 minutes rest periods, you were just a dinosaur. That all was completely blown apart. That's just nonsense, right? So I just want to, as I always like to do with you guys, is bring you back to the last 70 years and understanding that the last 5 or 10 years of research it's a very small window of what you see in the entirety of what's going on. What we're seeing right now is a very small window, and I wouldn't trust it for your own progress necessarily. So I'll give you my personal example. Back when I first discovered full body training, I wanted to be able to condense more work into my workouts, and I learned about full body training from Dr. Casey Butt, who personally via email taught me how to do it, which was really nice of him. Gave his time freely, which is really nice. I'll always appreciate that. But anyway, I worked up to, after a long time doing full body workouts, I worked up to doing 100 kilos in the bench press for a set of 8, 8, 8 with, I think it was 60 seconds rest, which is pretty traumatic. Like 100 for 8, no one's writing home about that, but 100 for 8, 45-second rest, 8, or 60-second rest, 8, then 60-second rest, and 8 is a lot of work. That's like 24 reps with 100 kilos in a very short space of time. That actually netted me a 150 kilo bench press. Now, admittedly, I had done 150 kilo bench press previously, but I was detrained. So the ligament structure was enough to allow me to do that. But think about the musculature. I had built up the musculature using pretty much a lightweight. I mean, the same principle can be said of push-ups, right? People do high rep push-ups with good transfer to bench pressing. It's the same kind of thing. So we're talking about the same thing. Density counts. Like, it's not just all about handling heavy weights on the set. The density of your workout counts. There was actually a routine back in the day from, I forget the guy's name, but it was called the Have It All routine. And he would do a number of singles and doubles packed into 60 seconds. Basically, the idea was do as many singles and doubles in, like, I think it was 3 minutes as you can on a certain lift. And it meant that you were getting a lot of good quality work in, and you were trying to pack in as much work as possible. The idea was your rest period, your set was 3 minutes, and you would try and do more reps within that 3 minutes. And it was a nice way of doing things. It was a good way of figuring out the Olympic lifts. But in any case, my point is density counts. Yes, it is about mechanical tension, but we can get more mechanical tension via density. Now, here's where I think you are going to see a great deal of variation with individuals, and possibly the reason why it works so well for me. I happen to think that people with a heavier bone structure, so your Dorian Yates of the world, okay, they can quite possibly benefit from really heavy training and longer rest periods more so than guys like me, because they have really thick joints. And so with doing one set to failure and beyond, they can probably handle the kind of weight which is really going to stress their muscles more so than a guy like me, where I've got a lighter bone structure and I'm a bit older now. So I feel like for somebody like me, and traditionally this has worked for me quite well, if I pack in a lot of work with a lighter weight, I still reach that failure point, but it's almost like I'm tiring my muscles out more so because my joint structure isn't capable of handling those loads for the required amount of volume that I need to do to actually progress in bodybuilding. This was highlighted for me when I moved from powerlifting to bodybuilding. Basically, I used the same form that I did in powerlifting with bodybuilding volume, and I kept getting hurt, right? So I had to slow down my bench presses and choose different exercises. So it basically meant that my joint structure wasn't holding up to bodybuilding volume with the same type of form that I used to do in powerlifting. So I had to change things. But essentially, my point with this is this. I think a lighter bone structure would possibly benefit from shorter rest periods because they can rely more on density to provide the mechanical tension than other things. Whereas somebody who's, the heaviest bone structure that you can get, like a Dorian Yates and even a Jay Cutler, could probably benefit from both. Like Jay Cutler, massive guy, more than likely can benefit from whatever he likes. But I think when you've got a lighter bone structure and your joints and ligaments limit you, that's when you need to experiment more with variety of exercises and I think variety of rest periods. So my point really with all of this is I don't think we have seen the last of the rest period research on this topic. I think individuality is going to play a role. I actually wrote my ligament theory to Schoenfeld last year, and he said it was quite interesting and that he may well do a study on it at some point. So there you go. I don't know if he's being nice or what. He's probably just being nice. But in any case, I believe it's a thing based on my results. And I think there's an individuality. And I don't think we've heard the last of the rest period argument. We've already seen the rest recommendations come down to 3 minutes, to 2 minutes from 3 minutes. And I feel that there is more of a nuance to that. So that is my video for today. Hopefully you guys find that interesting. Let me know what you think.